starting off this list with encephalitis lethargica, also known as the sleeping sickness. This strange ailment swept across the world between 1917 and 1928, leaving medical professionals baffled and horrified. The epidemic affected millions of people with symptoms ranging from mild lethargy to severe cases of catatonia, where individuals would become completely motionless and unresponsive, almost like statues. The cause of the disease remained elusive as doctors struggled to find a definitive explanation for its origin and transmission. During the height of the epidemic, patients were observed in a trance-like state, often remaining immobile for weeks or even years. Some victims also experienced psychiatric symptoms such as hallucinations and delirium, and scientists had several theories, including viral infections or exposure to toxins, but none could provide a definitive explanation. The epidemic gradually subsided by the late 1920s, with sporadic cases occurring afterward, and that might be the strangest thing about this one. It seemed to just flare up and then disappear. Next up, we have Overton Bridge. Fair warning, if you ever find yourself in Scotland with your pet dog, do not take it to this bridge. Dogs seem to really enjoy leaping off of it. Overton Bridge, located near Dumbarton in Scotland, has gained quite the reputation due to its mysterious phenomenon associated with it. For decades, the bridge has been the site of a large number of dog deaths. They just leap off the bridge, and as to why they do so, no one knows. The peculiar incidents date back to the 1950s, with over 50 dogs reportedly plunging from the same spot on the bridge. Even more strange is that dogs typically jump from the same side as well. Numerous theories have been proposed to try and explain the mystery surrounding the bridge. Some speculate that there may be an undetectable scent or maybe a sound that only dogs can hear that lures them to jump. Others have suggested supernatural or paranormal explanations, of course, but it still remains a mystery. Even after investigations, including studies by animal behaviorists and structural engineers. Number 8, the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. It's a very famous one. This has to be the most perplexing aviation mystery in recent history. On March 8th of 2014, the Boeing 777 with 239 passengers and crew members on board seemed to vanish without a trace. The flight was en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing when just a little under an hour after takeoff, it disappeared from radar screens, leaving behind no distress signals or communication indicating any issues on board. The search for Flight 370 started in the Gulf of Thailand and the South China Sea, which was when the captain, Zahari Ahmad Shah, last made contact with air traffic control before the plane disappeared from screens. It was soon discovered that the plane actually made a sharp turn, redirecting its route completely, flying for several hours before it would have eventually run out of fuel over the vast expanse of the southern Indian Ocean, where satellite data suggested the plane had likely gone down. Despite extensive efforts involving multiple countries and cutting-edge technology, though, no wreckage was initially found. Of course, a bunch of theories started being proposed: possible mechanical failure, the captain deciding to take his own life as well as the crew, conspiracy theories involving government cover-ups, even a UFO abduction. The disappearance of Flight 370 has left the families of the victims behind, desperate for some kind of closure and resolution.
At number 7, we have the King List. Dating all the way back to the 3rd millennium BCE, this giant slab known as the King List lists all of the Sumerian kings with their respective dynasties, locations, and the times they were in power. This may not seem like much of a mystery to you, but the mystery isn't the list of the Sumerian kings on the slab, but what is actually included in the list of kings. There are mythological events inscribed on the slab, as well as the events of the Great Flood and the tales of Gilgamesh, meaning that the stories from the Old Testament could indeed be true, and that the kings included on the list were actually gods or demigods. Hopefully all that power didn't go to their heads. At number 6, we have the Antikythera mechanism. Back in 1900, a group of sponge divers discovered a shipwreck in the Mediterranean dating all the way back to 70 to 60 BCE. These divers salvaged 3 pieces of bronze making up what is now known as the Antikythera mechanism. This shoebox-sized artifact stunned scholars for over a century due to the fact that the object's gears and internal mechanisms were far beyond any of the known Greek tech of the time. Some even believe that this object is proof of ancient aliens' visitations to Earth. Although in the late 20th century, X-rays showed that the object is designed to track astronomical movements and was confirmed later by CT scans that revealed inscriptions for what was basically an ancient computer. While the object's use has now been confirmed, what is still puzzling is the advanced construction and precision of this tool that is believed to be way more advanced than what was available at the time. I don't know. If you ask me, I say aliens. At number 5, we have the stone spheres of Costa Rica. Ever since the 1940s, scientists have been digging up these ancient mysterious spheres in the Disappearance Delta of Costa Rica. Originally discovered by agricultural forays by the United Fruit Company, small stone spheres ranging from a few centimeters wide to 2 meters in diameter and weighing over 16 tons have been popping up everywhere in the Disappearance Delta. Every single one of these spheres is man-made and made up of an igneous stone known as granodiorite. Many of these stone spheres have been moved to high-profile locations throughout Costa Rica, and some are even now privately owned. Everyone seems to love them for their decoration, but the coolest thing about them is that absolutely no one knows why, how, or who made these strange objects. Seems to be a common theme, huh? At number 4, we have the bog bodies of Northern Europe. Ever since the 18th century, hundreds and hundreds of well-preserved human bodies have been discovered in the peat bogs of Northern Europe. Some of these bodies have been dated all the way back to 8000 BCE. Some of you may be familiar with the famous Toland man, who was discovered back in 1950 by 2 Danish farmers in a small town in Denmark. The Toland man is believed to be from the pre-Roman Iron Age of the 3rd century BCE. His body was so well preserved that scientists were able to look at the contents of his stomach to determine where he lived. Now, I know what you're thinking. Dewey, this sounds amazingly gross and cool, but where's the mystery, my dude? Well, I'm glad you asked. All of the bodies that have been found have no explanation as to why they were placed in the bogs, nor why this way of disposal would be utilized. There are only speculations that these people were either sacrifices or social outcasts who were fated to meet their doom. Wow. And I thought high school kids were mean. Coming in at number 3 is the underwater ruins of Japan. Just under the surface off the coast of Yonaguni-jima is Japan's very own Atlantis. First discovered back in 1995, divers and researchers believed the findings to be nothing more than just a series of weird rock formations that included straight lines and right angles. Later, there were researchers that discovered a large stone gateway, carved stairways, and streets to huge vaulting towers. Many believe the underwater mystery to be the fallen city of the Jomon people. Experts believe that the city didn't fall into the sea like other fabled underwater cities, but actually slowly submerged over thousands of years. It is believed that this site could hold secrets and answers to all of the other theorized underwater cities around the world, such as Atlantis. Now, we could continue to theorize, or we could just believe that Aquaman starring Jason Momoa is actually a documentary and he currently does live in the ocean. I could see it. At number 2, we have the Piri Reis map. In 1929, this old map was found in the Sultan's palace in Istanbul, Turkey. A legendary commander of the Ottoman fleet by the name of Piri Reis, who lived from 1465 to 1553, is the author of the map. Reis's map is extremely precise. So precise that it actually includes the continent of Antarctica. But wait, hold the phone. Antarctica wasn't discovered until 1773 by British Captain James Cook. But yet, here is Piri Reis's map showing Antarctica back in 1513. Was Antarctica actually just discovered much earlier than originally thought? Or did James Cook just take credit for someone else's hard work? We might never know. Finally, coming in at number 1 is the infamous Big Daddy Stonehenge. In case you've been living under a prehistoric rock for the last few thousand years, you've probably heard of Stonehenge. Stonehenge is a giant prehistoric monument that is located in England and dates back to 3000 BC. The monument consists of a ring of standing stones all weighing around 25 ton, originally from a quarry located 25 kilometers or 15.53 miles away from the current monument. Not one person knows how these ancient people could have moved these massive stones without the use of a wheel or pulley, or why they were even formed in the first place. Is it an ancient observatory? Healing place? Did ancient aliens create it as a landing pad? We may never actually know.
Number 10. the wow signal. In 1977, astronomer Jerry Ellman was researching at The Ohio State University when an incredible and unexplainable radio signal was detected using the school's Big Ear telescope. In those days, information was run through what was called an IBM 1130 mainframe computer before being printed on paper and then studied by hand. Upon reviewing the findings, Jerry came across something he had never seen before. There, in a vertical column, was the sequence 6EQUJ5. Jerry was amazed and immediately circled the sequence and wrote "wow" right beside it. Hence the name. The signal they picked up had come from nearly 220 million light years away, and there was no explanation as to how or why a radio signal could be detected from that distance. It immediately became a sensation in both the science community and the rest of the world, and was used to support the search for alien life in the universe. Jerry himself says he's convinced that it certainly has the potential to be the first signal from extraterrestrial intelligence, and I agree. Number 9. Einstein's last words. Albert Einstein was a German-born theoretical physicist, widely acknowledged to be one of the greatest and most influential physicists of all time. Einstein is best known for developing the theory of relativity, but he also made important contributions to the development of theory of quantum mechanics. Einstein passed away at Princeton Hospital, New Jersey on April 18, 1955. He died because of internal bleeding caused by a rupture of an abdominal aortic aneurysm. Einstein knew he was going to die, as he refused treatment because he didn't believe in prolonging life artificially. There was a nurse present at the time of Einstein's death, and she actually heard him mutter something, but she didn't know exactly what it was, as she couldn't understand German. Maybe Einstein revealed an incredibly important realization, or he just said goodbye to the world in his native language. But guess what? We'll never know, and this will be one mystery that can't be solved. Number 8. Genghis Khan burial site. Genghis Khan was the founder and first Khagan of the Mongol Empire, which later became the largest adjoining land empire in history. Having spent the majority of his life uniting the Mongol tribes, he launched a series of military campaigns which conquered large parts of China and Central Asia. He achieved everything he wanted, but the emperor died during the fall of Yunchuan, which is now part of China. The reasons for his death are unclear, as well as the place he was buried in. Researchers think it might be somewhere in the vicinity of the Mongol sacred mountain of Burkhan Khaldun in current northeastern Mongolia. According to legend, he asked to be buried without markings or any sign, and after he died, his body was returned to present-day Mongolia. Marco Polo wrote that even by the 13th century, the Mongols did not know the location of the tomb. Another folkloric legend says that a river was diverted over his grave to make it impossible to find. Other tales state that his grave was stamped over by many horses, that trees were planted over the site, and that the permafrost also played its part in the hiding of the burial site, but to this day, we still don't know where it is.
The Mary Celeste. Alright, we have a ghost ship on the list. It's December 4th, 1872. A ship is found floating in the Atlantic Ocean, completely empty. Empty of crew and passengers, that is. Everything else was intact, all the cargo remained, and there was no damage to the vessel. The only thing missing was a single lifeboat. The ship had set sail from New York 1 month prior, led by Captain Benjamin Briggs, along with his wife, daughter, and 7 other crew members. To this day, nobody knows how or why everyone went missing. Some speculated that the ship could have been attacked by pirates, but there was no sign of a struggle, and the last entry on the ship's daily log was completely ordinary. There were no signs that anything was amiss. It seemed as if everyone had just boarded the lifeboat and sailed off, never to be seen or heard from again. And at number 6, we have the deaths of the Jameson family. Bobby Dale Jameson, his wife Sherilyn, and their 6-year-old daughter Madison vanished without a trace while on a trip to the rugged terrain of the San Bois Mountains in Oklahoma. The family's truck was discovered abandoned, and inside were their personal belongings, including wallets, $32,000 in cash, IDs, and their dog, who was fortunately still alive. There was no sign of a struggle in the truck, although police did find an 11-page hate letter written by Sherilyn to her husband. There was also surveillance footage taken outside of the Jamesons' home showing them making a number of trips from their property to the truck back and forth. They seemed to be moving in an almost trance-like state. So there were just so many ways that this thing could have gone, and it was impossible for authorities to actually figure out exactly what happened. The search for the Jameson family spanned months and involved extensive resources, but no sign of them was found until 4 years later when the skeletal remains of the family was found just 3 miles from where their truck had been discovered. Authorities were never able to determine the cause of death as their bodies were too decomposed, and to this day the circumstances surrounding their deaths are all but a mystery. Number 5, the feet mystery. Sounds pretty innocuous, but it's actually pretty disturbing. Since 2007, the discovery of severed feet along the coastlines of British Columbia have been found and remains a perplexing and eerie phenomenon till this day. The first severed foot was discovered by a young girl, of all people, in August of 2007 on Jedediah Island, and since then a total of 21 feet have been found in various locations along the coast. Speculation and theories have arisen, ranging from accidents at sea, of course foul play. Authorities have stated that they ruled out foul play, though, proposing that the feet most likely belonged to people who either took their own lives or died in accidents, and that the feet simply separated from the natural decomposition process, and then because they were in shoes, they remained buoyant and somewhat preserved until they finally floated onto shore. Extensive investigations examining missing persons cases, forensic analysis, and DNA testing were done, but there have still been no definitive answers. Number 4, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse Keepers. Located on a remote island off the coast of Scotland, this lighthouse was manned by 3 experienced keepers, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur. On December 15th, a passing ship noticed that the lighthouse's light was not shining. A relief vessel was sent to investigate, only to find the island deserted and the keepers nowhere to be found. The lighthouse's door was unlocked and a meal lay unfinished on the table, as if the keepers had just vanished abruptly out of thin air. Strangely, the logbook contained weird entries from December 12th describing severe storms and the men's increasingly erratic behavior. One entry mentioned something unusual, but its meaning was never deciphered. Various theories have emerged to explain the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers' disappearance. Some speculate that they were swept away in a storm, others suggest foul play, and of course, with any unexplained event like this, some think there could be a ghost in the mix. Until this day, though, no conclusive evidence or an explanation has ever been found. The mysterious deaths at Dyatlov Pass. In late January of 1959, a group of 10 hikers led by Igor Dyatlov set out on a challenging trek through the Ural Mountains in Soviet Russia. Tragically, their expedition took a horrific turn, apparently. When the hikers failed to report back as planned, a search party was sent out. What they discovered at Dyatlov Pass was a scene of utter terror. The hikers' tent had been torn open from the inside. The group's belongings were left behind, and the search continued. The bodies of the hikers were found scattered in the surrounding area, some partially clothed and exhibiting horrifying injuries. Some victims had fractured skulls, crushed chest, or unexplained internal injuries, as if subjected to extreme force. Some theories point to an avalanche or severe weather conditions, while others suggest a possible attack of some kind. I think possible is a bit of an understatement there. They were obviously attacked by someone or something. As some people even think, maybe it was UFOs or a Yeti. However, none of these theories have ever been proven. The death of Mary Reeser. In the early morning hours of July 2nd in Petersburg, Florida, Mary's landlord arrived at her apartment with a telegraph, only to discover that the doorknob was hot to the touch. So she phoned the police. Firefighters arrived on the scene. However, what they discovered inside defied all logic and explanation. Amidst the charred remains of a chair the widow had been sitting on was Mary's body, which had been reduced to a pile of ash, with only a portion of her left foot remaining intact. There's a photo of that online, by the way, if you feel like Googling it. Pretty disturbing. The strangest part of the case was that the surrounding area, including the furniture, nearby objects, even a stack of newspapers, was just unscathed by the fire that had consumed her body completely. Forensic experts were utterly confused by the area of the fire's impact. It seemed to have solely targeted Mary Reeser's body while sparing everything else in the room. Of course, theories and speculation began to spread, including the controversial concept of spontaneous human combustion, which I always smile when I say, because it reminds me of Spinal Tap, but it would be horrifying if it actually happened in real life, as it might have here. I don't know. This theory suggests that individuals can suddenly just burst into flames without an external ignition source. Pretty weird. Finally, though, we have one of my favorite UFO abduction accounts, the Travis Walton case. On November 5th, 1975, Travis and his crew of fellow loggers were working in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in Arizona. They claimed to witness strange lights in the sky as they were driving back from their work site, and as they got closer to the light, they spotted a large glowing object hovering above the trees. Curiosity got the better of them, and Travis got out of the truck and approached the craft. The other guys were like pleading with him to come back to the truck, and then all of a sudden Travis was hit by a beam of light and seemingly lifted into the air. Panicked and frightened, the remaining loggers just fled the scene, leaving Travis behind. They soon decided, though, to turn back and retrieve him, but Travis was no longer there. They later reported the incident to local authorities, sparking, of course, a search for Travis, which lasted for 5 days. Astonishingly, Travis reappeared unharmed, but deeply traumatized, recounting a bizarre tale of abduction and encounters with extraterrestrial beings. Short, bald, black eyes, your classic kind of gray alien. Makes this case even more interesting, though, is the corroboration by Travis's fellow loggers. All of them confirmed witnessing the same strange craft and the beam of light that struck Travis. They even took lie detector tests that all came back saying they were telling the truth, or at least believed that they had seen what they had seen. Now, polygraph tests, they're not always 100% credible, but it is interesting that all of them came back positive.
Starting off at number 10, vampire killings. So starting us off, we have the supposed vampire killings from the 1800s. Now, spoiler alert here, they weren't actually vampires. Well, I guess I don't know that for sure, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say they weren't. Anyways, back in the 1800s, people in New England believed that cadavers were rising from their graves at night and preying on the living. So to solve this problem, they began exhuming the cadavers. Now, some kept it simple and just turned the cadaver face down, but others jumped to more extreme methods like ripping the bones apart and rearranging them, or burning the deceased person's heart and inhaling the smoke. Apparently at the time, it was believed inhaling the smoke cured tuberculosis, though I can only imagine it made matters much worse for them. Some towns were so into the ritual that they would even hold festivals during the process and celebrate the exhumation and subsequent destruction of the corpses altogether. So while it was incredibly unsettling, they did truly believe they were vampires haunting them in the night, so I guess it gave them some peace of mind. Next up at number 9, dentures. While today dentures are made from composite resin or sometimes porcelain, during the 18th and 19th centuries, of course, those materials weren't available. But as you can imagine, people were still losing teeth at an even higher rate due to the high sugar diet, attempted teeth whitening, which was really just wearing away their enamel instead of brightening it, and the overall lack of knowledge around hygiene. So dentures were still needed and wanted by many. So what was their material of choice? Well, for the easiest and most profitable route, many would acquire the teeth from dead bodies. Although if you had some money, you might be able to afford dentures made from ivory. Other materials were sometimes the teeth of animals or wood, but honestly, I think we can all agree that none of those sound like terribly sanitary options, considering professional physicians at the time weren't sterilizing instruments, and some didn't even believe in disinfecting prior to surgery. Next up at number 8, stained glass. If you walk into just about any old church, you'll notice the walls are decorated with beautiful stained glass. But what might surprise you is that in some of the particularly older pieces, there is a strange ingredient that helps it all come together. In 1112, a German monk wrote about the process of creating the beautifully colored glass, and as he detailed, it starts off innocently enough, adding sand and potash at a high temp until it becomes molten. From there, they'd add add a stabilizer before coloring the glass with different metallic oxides like copper, cobalt, and gold. But once the glass was cooled and shaped, the small details were added by paint. They made the paint usually from lead or copper and would then suspend it in urine. So quite literally, some of those old stained glass windows were painted with pea paint, which I mean kind of just makes me giggle if I'm honest, but it is definitely a weird ingredient to think about being in paint.
In our number 7 spot today we have Sacsayhuaman. I'm sure I said that wrong, so my apologies. This stone structure is located in Cuzco, Peru, and ever since its discovery, it has been baffling historians. It was first thought that the Incans built this to be a fortress, but it is now believed that it may have actually been used for ceremonies. Despite our best guesses as to what it could have been used for, the most mysterious thing about it is how it could have been built. The stones in this structure fit together so perfectly that they stay together without anything holding them in place, and they've done this for thousands of years. While the stones fit together so well, they're also all different shapes, which has led researchers to believe that they may have kind of made up the design as they went along with the building. It is so cool to think that while they may have just been improvising and going with the flow, we're now here talking about it as one of our greatest mysteries. Also, some of the stones themselves are pretty huge, so the fact that they were also able to move them at all is quite a feat. It is very likely we'll never know exactly what the process to build this structure was like because, well, no one who was there is still around today. In our number 6 spot today we have the Shroud of Turin. This shroud, also known as the Holy Shroud, is a linen cloth that bears the negative image of a man. If you haven't heard of it before, you might be sitting there wondering how this could possibly be mysterious, but that is because many people believe that this piece of fabric was the burial shroud that Jesus of Nazareth was wrapped in after his crucifixion. It was first mentioned in 1354, but as of recently, through things like carbon dating, it may be becoming more clear that this in fact was not the shroud of Jesus, but that still leaves us with the question, whose shroud was it? It clearly has the imprint of a man, and researchers say that the imprint features injuries that are consistent with the crucifixion process, but unfortunately in our history that wasn't necessarily an uncommon practice, so finding the answers to that question may be harder than we would like it to be. Or maybe he wasn't crucified at all, but we were just reading the signs wrong. At the end of the day, many people still view this as a religious item, and hey, maybe it actually is. I don't have the answers to this mystery, so who am I to tell you what's right? In our number 5 spot today we have the Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich Manuscript was purchased by a Polish book dealer, Wilfrid Voynich, which is where it gets its name. He bought the mysterious manuscript from Italian Jesuits in 1912, and ever since then it has been the source of much speculation and the kryptonite of cryptographers everywhere. The manuscript is written in some sort of lost language, and no one has ever been able to figure out either which language it is or what the manuscript says. William Friedman, who is the chief cryptoanalyst in the United States Army, tried to decipher what this manuscript is saying for 30 years, and even he couldn't quite crack the code. It is said that the manuscript contains information about herbal remedies, therapeutic bathing, and astrology, but what if it holds all of the answers to all of the mysteries on this list? I guess we'll never know. In our number 4 spot today we have the Somerton Man. The Somerton Man was an unidentified man who was found perished on the Somerton Park beach in South Australia in 1948. Since then, his case, who he is, and what happened to him has been a mystery plaguing authorities and all of those who are now invested in this case and its secrets. Public interest in the case arose in part due to how mysterious it was, but also because of the fact that the death occurred in a time of heightened international tension. The mysteries surrounding this one span more than just who this man was, however. Firstly, it is unclear how this man passed away. Was it some sort of undetectable poison? How could no one have any idea despite being able to examine the body? The next mystery is that a little secret note was found in his pocket that was torn from a book. The note in his pocket read "To Mom Should," which means is over or is finished. Talk about ominous, but is this note connected to the case or is it just a weird coincidence? We don't know. Earlier this year, the body of the Somerton Man was actually exhumed in order for DNA testing to be done, as we of course have much more technology and DNA databases than we did at the time of his burial. While we haven't had any updates yet, maybe this exhumation means that this one isn't impossible to solve? I guess we'll all just have to wait and see. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Roman dodecahedrons. These crazy things were of course named after their 12-sided shape, but that is mostly all we know for sure about them. They seem to have been made sometime between 100 and 300 CE, and they are small, hollow objects made out of copper alloy, and each of the 12 sides has a hole in it that leads to the hollow center. The first one of these was found in 1739, and since then about 116 similar ones have been found. They have been found in Wales, Hungary, Spain, and the most have been found in Germany and France. There has even been one found that has 20 sides. Here's the thing though, we really do not know what they were made or used for. Some assumptions are that they were candlestick holders because candle wax was found in 2 of them. Some think that they are dice, instruments used for measuring distances or size, a coin measuring device to determine counterfeits, and truly the list just goes on. I guess that was a long way of saying we have absolutely no idea. In our number 2 spot today, we have the copper scroll treasure. Who doesn't love a good old-fashioned treasure hunt? Well, probably the people who are searching for the Copper Scroll treasure because they simply cannot find it. The Copper Scroll is one of the Dead Sea Scrolls that was found in Cave 3 near Qumran, but it is by far the most unique. While the other scrolls were written on parchment or papyrus, this one was written on metal. And while the others were more a sort of literary work, this one features a list of 64 places that are said to be the hiding place of various items of silver and gold. The final point on the scrolls points to a duplicate document with more details, but that document has never been found. There are many theories as to where the treasure could be, where it came from, or if it even exists. Since it hasn't been found, it truly is tough to say. Or maybe it's already been found. Or maybe somewhere on some etheric plane, whoever made these scrolls is laughing at all of us trying to figure it out. Who knows? In our number 1 spot today, we have the Nazca Lines. The Nazca Lines are a group of the most famous geoglyphs that exist in the world, and they are located in the Nazca Desert in southern Peru. They were created sometime between 500 BCE and 500 CE, and we have now found tons of them, but people think that there are even more. Here's the thing that's so mysterious about them though. We know about them because we have the technology to get a bird's eye view of the area. Whether it's through some sort of satellite, being in an airplane, or even flying a drone, we can see them and know they are there because we can see the gorgeous pictures in full view. But when they were created, that technology didn't exist, so how were they able to make these huge pictures without being able to see them from above? The designs measure between 400 to 1,100 meters across, and the group covers an area of 50 kilometers squared. It is believed that they may have been created in order for the deities in the sky to see, but that doesn't answer how, and to be honest, the reason as to why is still just a guess, as the honest answer does still remain a mystery as well. Despite how mysterious they sure are stunning to look at, and I think that's something we can all appreciate. It's cool that they were somehow naturally preserved, which allows us to now be amazed at what the past humans were capable of. Starting off at our number 10 spot, we have the tomb of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Cleopatra was the last queen of Egypt, and for over 2,000 years she has been quite an enigma. After losing a war and being captured by Roman Emperor Octavian, according to ancient writers, Cleopatra ended up taking her own life in 30 BCE by having a venomous snake called an asp bite her. She was then reportedly buried in a mausoleum with Antony, apparently with a ton of gold and riches, but no one has ever been able to find the location of this burial site. There are a ton of theories surrounding the potential location of the tomb, with some even suggesting that it may have already been found by grave robbers, who of course aren't about to disclose their findings. Many have searched areas in Alexandria, Egypt, where it is thought that her burial location would be, especially considering that this is where the palace once was, but Alexandria has seen a ton of coastal erosion over the years. This means that a lot of the land that once existed, including the land that the palace was located on, is now fully submerged in water. Experts believe it might be the largest possibility that we haven't found the tomb because it too is submerged. But there is always a chance that it is just really well hidden. At the end of the day, the location of the tomb, or I guess even the potential of its existence, remains a mystery. In our number 9 spot today we have Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper was an unidentified serial killer who was active mostly in the impoverished areas of the Whitechapel district of London in 1888. The crimes that have been attributed to the Ripper usually were against sex workers in the area, and the things that were done to them were absolutely horrible and horrifying. While it is believed that there were 11 crimes he committed, not all of them can be solidly connected to this one criminal for certain. There are 5, however, who are widely accepted as being his victims. These 5 are Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. Because of some of the things that happened to 3 of the victims, it was believed that the perpetrator had some sort of anatomical or even surgical knowledge. When the connections between the crimes began to rise, numerous letters began to be received by both media outlets as well as Scotland Yard. The letters were of people claiming to be the killer, and the name Jack the Ripper actually originated from one of these letters. This story gained so much notoriety, and it has carried on all of these years, although the story told is usually a mix of historical research, folklore, and pseudo-history. Because of the length of time it's been, it truly is highly unlikely that we will ever find out the true identity of Jack the Ripper, but the far more important part is that we know the names of his victims so that their story may live on. In our number 8 spot today we have the works of old men. The works of old men are structures that were first observed from the air by a British pilot in 1972, and they are located near the Azraq Oasis in Jordan. There are hundreds of these wheel-like structures that are each over 80 feet wide, some even as large as 200 feet. These huge structures have been dated back so far that they just might be the oldest man-made creations that we have ever found, which is truly unbelievable. While this is all amazing, we have absolutely no idea what they are or why they were created. The theories range from things like sun tracking to cemeteries to some sort of spiritual relevance, but we really just are not sure. While things like this are incredible finds, and it's amazing that some of the first man-made things still exist on our Earth, it is insane how we have no idea what they are or how to use them, and unfortunately, especially because of the fact that it's been thousands and thousands of years, it's most likely that the mysteries surrounding them are totally lost with the past. Number 7. City of Atlantis. Writing in the 4th century BC, the Greek philosopher Plato told a story of a land named Atlantis that existed in the Atlantic Ocean and supposedly conquered much of Europe and Africa in prehistoric times. In the story, the prehistoric Athenians strike back against Atlantis in a conflict that ends with Atlantis vanishing beneath the waves. While no serious scholar believes that the story is literally true, they have speculated that the legend could have been inspired in part by real events that happened in Greek history. Many believe that the lost city of Atlantis story was an allegory created by Plato to illustrate the dangers of hubris and greed. In contrast, others point to evidence of ancient cultures in the Mediterranean that could have been connected to Atlantis. This story has captivated people's imaginations for centuries, with theories about its location ranging from a sunken island near the Azores to civilization in Antarctica. Despite extensive research and exploration, the truth behind Atlantis remains unknown, and the mystery may never be solved. Whatever the truth, the lost city of Atlantis will likely remain a mystery for generations. Number 6. Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper was an unidentified serial killer active in and around the Whitechapel district of London, England in the autumn of 1888. Attacks ascribed to Jack the Ripper typically involved a female night worker who lived in and worked in the East End of London. Their throats were cut prior to abdominal mutilations, and the removal of internal organs from the last 3 of the victims led to speculation that Jack had some anatomical or surgical knowledge. Rumors that the deaths were connected intensified in September and October 1888, and numerous letters were received by media outlets and Scotland Yard from individuals claiming to be responsible. The From Hell letter received by George Lusk of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee was allegedly sent from Jack the Ripper, and it came with a half-preserved human kidney, reportedly taken from one of the victims. Now, most of the reports done by the police were destroyed during World War II, but what from remains, we are able to learn that more than 2,000 people were interviewed, upwards of 300 people were investigated, and 80 people were detained. However, there was no conclusion to who the killer was. But to ease your minds, Jack the Ripper has to be dead now, so no worrying about him. Number 5. Tomb of Cleopatra. Ancient writers claim that Cleopatra VII and her lover Mark Antony were buried together in a tomb after their deaths in 30 BC. The writer Plutarch wrote that the tomb was located near the Temple of Isis, an ancient Egyptian goddess, and was lofty and beautiful monument containing treasures made of gold, silver, emeralds, pearls, ebony, and ivory. But the location of the tomb remains a mystery. In 2010, Hazay Hawass, Egypt's former antiques minister, conducted excavations at a site near Alexandria which contained a number of tombs dating to the era when Cleopatra ruled Egypt. While many interesting archaeological discoveries were made, Cleopatra VII's tomb was not among them, he reported in a series of news releases. Archaeologists have noted that even if Cleopatra's tomb does survive to this day, it may have been heavily plundered and unidentifiable, so it seems like nobody will be finding that treasure anytime soon. Number 4. The Copper Scroll. The Copper Scroll is one of the most mysterious artifacts in history. It was discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1952 and is believed to be around 2,000 years old. The scroll consists of 2 copper sheets covered with a text written in ancient Hebrew script. It contains a list of 64 items or locations of hidden treasure, including gold and silver coins, sacramental vessels, and other valuable items. The scroll is not only remarkable because of its age, but also because it is the only known ancient text written on metal. This means that it has been preserved much better than other scrolls that have degraded over time. Now, despite its incredible age, many items on the list remain a mystery, and their locations have yet to be discovered. There have been many attempts to decipher the Copper Scroll, but no one has been able to make sense of it. Yet. Some experts believe that the scroll could provide valuable information about the history of Jewish people in the region at the time, while others think it's simply a hoax. Whatever the case, the Copper Scroll remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Number 3. Julius Caesar's son. One of the most enduring mysteries of the Roman Empire surrounds the existence of Julius Caesar's son. Some sources claim that he was adopted by Julius Caesar and named Caesarion, while others allege that he was the illegitimate child of the Roman leader and Cleopatra. Regardless of which version of the story is authentic, there's no denying that the case of Caesarion has yet to be solved. The only evidence of his existence comes from ancient texts, which refer to him as both as an adopted son of Caesar and an illegitimate child of Cleopatra. However, none of these texts can be verified, leaving its true origin unknown. It's also unclear what became of him after Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, leaving some historians to speculate that he may have had his life ended or gone into hiding. While the mystery of Caesarion may never be solved, it does make for an exciting tale to contemplate. Did he exist? What became of him? Was he ever genuinely recognized as Julius Caesar's son? These questions remain unanswered, but perhaps the truth about Caesarion will come to light one day. Number 2. The Sumerians. The Sumer are the earliest known civilization that was located in the historical region of southern Mesopotamia, aka current Iraq. Sumerians were the first to use a written language, they invented a number system, the first wheeled vehicles, sun-dried bricks, and irrigation for farming. But historians are not completely sure where they came from. They had an isolated language, meaning that it was not related to surrounding languages, so that makes it difficult to trace their journey. They suggest that the Sumerians may have come from North Africa, while according to some other data, they might have originated in Caucasus. There are even more theories, and it just shows how mysterious the origins of the people who created the first human civilization are. And coming in at number 1 is the Money Pit. The Oak Island Money Pit is a mysterious site on Nova Scotia's Oak Island that has been rumored to contain buried treasure. The legend of the Money Pit dates back to 1795, when 3 boys discovered a depression on the island and found a layer of flagstones beneath. What began as an innocent exploration quickly became a massive treasure hunt, with hundreds of searchers excavating the island for over 200 years. The Money Pit has been dug down more than 200 feet, but many believe that the treasure lies much more deep, like as deep as 500 feet. As the diggers have gone deeper, they've encountered multiple booby traps, such as flood tunnels and stone plugs designed to protect whatever lies at the bottom. So far, the only artifacts that have been discovered are 2 links of a gold chain and a stone inscribed with the letters VI and C, which some believe stands for Viva Cristo. Despite these discoveries, the mystery of the Money Pit remains unsolved. Many believe it contains a great treasure, while others think it may be a hoax. While hundreds of theories have been proposed, from hidden pirate booty to ancient Native American artifacts, no one knows what lies at the bottom of Oak Island money pit, and I'm not sure we ever will. Coming in at number 10 is the knock in space. In 2003, Yang Liwi made history as China's first man in space. While there though, he experienced something terrifying. He heard a knock. Now back on Earth, Yang described the event to reporters. The sound reminded him of someone knocking the body of the spaceship, just as knocking an iron bucket with a wooden hammer. He could not place the source of the sound. He said it neither came from the outside nor inside of the spaceship. He set out to explore the shuttle for any hints. Staring out his porthole, he saw nothing noticeable on the side. There was nothing faulty inside either. No one could explain the eerie knock. Now scientists have had little success uncovering the sound's mysterious origins when it came back. Returning to Earth, Yang inspected the capsule again, and he and his coworkers were still confused. The crew attempted to recreate the sound, but nothing came close. Because sound needs a medium, the most likely reason was an object physically hitting the spacecraft, but no marks indicated outside contact. The most accepted theory is the metallic surface of the exterior contracted while exposed to the cold vacuum of space. Now other astronauts have reported similar sounds in 2005 and 2008, leading to suspicions that it has to do with the temperature, but they don't know for sure what it was. Number 9. SL-1. SL-1 was a prototype nuclear reactor built in the 1950s in the Idaho desert. The facility was constructed by the Army as part of an experiment to create a portable reactor that could be used to power remote installations. As these facilities would be staffed by military personnel and not atomic scientists, SL-1 was designed to be easier to operate than a standard nuclear reactor. If the reactor crew wanted/needed to control the reactor, all they had to do was raise lower a series of 5 control rods. On January 3rd, 1961, a 3-man night crew, CE-1 Richard Legg and Army specialists John Brines and Richard McKinley had to restart the reactor after it had been shut down for 2 weeks prior for the holidays. Now this task involved raising the central rod only 4 inches. For some reason though, Brines lifted the rod 26 inches, and that's all it took to send the reactor supercritical. Its fuel melted and explosively vaporized, launching the reactor 9 feet into the air and spreading radioactive debris all over the room. This chain reaction took 4 seconds and ended the lives of Brines and Legg immediately. Emergency personnel rescued a heavily irradiated McKinley from the reactor room, but he passed away from his injuries while en route to a medical facility. Now in order to prevent him from contaminating anyone, the ambulance containing his body, which was wrapped in lead blankets, was dumped in the middle of the desert until it could be dealt with properly. While McKinley and Brines were accounted for, no one could locate Legg. After they returned to the site for a brief search, his body was found pinned to the ceiling by a large plug that entered through his groin and out through his shoulder. It took 6 days to recover him via a careful operation that involved guys with long poles knocking him off the ceiling onto a structure below. Number 8. Melted corpses. On December 5th, 1876, the Brooklyn Theater's performance of The Two Orphans had 900 guests in the audience. At roughly 11:20 p.m., a small fire broke out in a backstage area, and in an attempt to calm everyone down, the actors broke character and began reassuring people there was nothing to worry about and that the flames were all a part of the show. But when a piece of flaming debris fell and nearly hit an actor, it caused them to freak out and run. Panic erupted and everyone sprinted for the doors. But while the audience on the ground floor could escape easily enough, the stairway leading to the balconies quickly became blocked and then became crush zones where dozens were trampled to death. The fire department initially figured that the majority of the crowd had escaped because someone entered the flaming building and quickly surveyed the balconies but didn't see anyone. In the light of the morning though, firemen found charred bodies inside the lobby, the stairwells, the backstage area, and the auditorium, some of which had been subjected to such insane temperatures that they fused with other corpses, creating a giant nightmare flesh rat king. Ugh. Now the fire ended the lives of so many people that local morgues were swiftly overwhelmed, and the only way to bury them in a timely fashion was a mass grave in a nearby cemetery.
Coming in at number 7, leather-bound books. Nowadays, it's unusual to even find real leather on anything, but once upon a time, the leather on books wasn't even from cows. It was from people. Called anthropodermic bibliopegi, the books were made in a similar way as they would now, but obviously with one huge difference. They used human skin instead of an animal. While there are actually only 18 confirmed books of its kind that still exist, we have no idea just how many there could have been all those years ago. Allegedly, the books were usually made from executed convicts, and during the French Revolution, there were rumors that a tannery for human skin was established outside of Paris. I mean, it kind of gives me the willies to think about it, and I'm just glad we've moved on to a different material to bind our books today. Next up at number 6, Minnie Dean. Wilhelmina Dean, or Minnie as she was often referred to, was a nanny in New Zealand during 1880 and was a well-known caretaker in her town. But something was off with the woman, and soon she began having quite the dark spot on her name and career. In 1889, one of the young people under her care suddenly died, as if out of nowhere, and initially it was viewed as a freak accident, but 2 years later the same thing happened again. Now, with 2 minors perished under her care, police decided to investigate further into the matter. After a bit of sleuthing, it was concluded that under Minnie's care, the 2 minors were as she was attempting to take out life insurance on them. Police immediately took the remaining young boy in her care, finding it in dirty clothes and drinking curdled milk. By 1895, the investigation into her crimes continued, and she was spotted trying to flee on a train with another victim in her arms. And when police searched her house, they found 3 more covered up victims. Eventually found guilty for all her crimes, she was the first and only woman ever hanged in New Zealand. Next up at number 5, radiation test subject. In 1999, a man named Hisashi Uchi was a power plant technician, and he became known for being exposed to the highest amount of radiation of any human in history. While working at the Tokamura nuclear power plant, after a lack of safety protocols, improper training, and just an overall pressure to meet deadlines, Uchi and his coworkers made a terrible error. They mistakenly mixed an incorrect measurement of radioactive materials into the wrong tank, and as you've probably figured out, it caused a near fatal burst of gamma rays. Hisashi, who happened to be the closest to the incident, was brutally injured and sent to the hospital. Once he was there, it was discovered he had no more white blood cells, so essentially meaning that he had no remaining immune system. And despite being in intense pain with a rapidly deteriorating condition, doctors kept him alive under the family's request. So for 83 days, Uchi remained alive, being used as a test subject for experimental radiation treatment by the doctors, which, I mean, in their defense was the request of the family, but still, he endured several cardiac arrests, lost all of his skin, and suffered brain damage as well as organ failure. One of the last things Uchi ever said was, quote, "I can't take it anymore, I'm not a guinea pig." And then finally, one more cardiac arrest released him from his torture. Coming in at number 4, Mumia. Most widely practiced between the 12th to the 17th century, although there were a few cases in the 18th century that pop up, mumia was widely used as a means of medicine in many European countries. Now, if you can't tell by the name, mumia is creepily just as it sounds, the use of human remains to fix a living person's ailments. It was believed by many of the top physicians at the time that ingesting certain remains prompted the medicinal power of the mummy and could cure things like coagulated blood, pain, coughs, inflammation, cramps, and even heal open wounds. Now, they didn't just sit around eating the carcass directly. Instead, they would either grind the bones into a powder and drink it from there, or drink an extracted liquid from the embalmed individual. In fact, it was so popular at one point that it's believed the reason there are so few mummies these days is because of the high demand of flesh at the time. Coming in at number 3, James Jameson. One of the heirs to the Jameson whiskey family fortune, Jameson considered himself to be an adventurer of sorts and often traveled to far-off lands, detailing the trips in his diary. In 1888, Jameson decided to head out to explore the Congo, and while there he wrote about and demanded some gruesome things from the locals. So before beginning this expedition, Jameson discovered that the area he was visiting was known to have a population that participated in the eating of other humans. Apparently, Jameson set out to witness it firsthand, which, I mean, why was that his dream? A little suspicious if you ask me, but I digress. According to Asad Farhan, who was his translator for the trip, Jameson bought a girl from a trader of slaves for a few handkerchiefs and gave her over to the tribe to be. Allegedly, he didn't pay the tribe directly, but in a roundabout way, he did sort of pay to have this girl killed. What's even more gross is that he proceeded to draw and paint watercolors of the gruesome event while it happened, which again, just wrong on so many levels. Coming in at number 2, Cambodian Barbies. You may have been taught about the Khmer Rouge in history class, but if they don't ring a bell, essentially they were an extreme communist regime in Cambodia that held government between 1975 to 1979. They were known for being extremely cruel and committed some of the most horrifying acts of genocide in history, with nearly 2 million perishing under their ruling. Now, during their radical rule, the entire country was isolated from all foreign influences. This included closing schools, hospitals, factories, banks, foreign agriculture. They believed this would stimulate the rebirth of the country, but of course, all it did was send it into desolate famine and poverty. Led by a man named Pol Pot, the people of the country could not forage for food, despite the fact that everyone was starving, and anyone who disobeyed the orders was killed. Apparently, as the people became more and more desperate, they began to turn to folk magic, turning Barbie dolls into smoking talismans for luck. Thankfully, since its dissolution in 1999, all the leaders have been jailed for their atrocities, and the people are freed from the genocidal regime. And last up, in our number 1 spot, the Rabbit Woman. Her name was Mary Toft, and in 1726 she became known throughout Surrey, England as having been the woman who gave birth to rabbits. Now, I know what you're thinking, that isn't possible. And you would be right, but still the story of how she convinced people it was real was crazy. Apparently Toft was actually pregnant at one point, but miscarried, and it could have been this that sent her into her madness. Toft began declaring that she was giving birth to various animal parts, and so her local doctor became involved in the case. At first, everyone actually believed her, as in fact a rabbit did, well, come out of her. And with a doctor backing up her claims, the king and his royal surgeon got involved. Unlike her local doctor, the king's surgeon was skeptical, and after discovering corn inside the stomach of one of the rabbits and hay in their droppings, it proved the animal hadn't developed inside Mary. Eventually, Mary Toft admitted to the hoax and explained that she had manually inserted the animals inside her to make the delivery as realistic as possible. She was immediately imprisoned for fraud, and the medical community was ridiculed for having been fooled.
Starting us off at number 10 is the Devil's Bible, also known as the Codex Gigas. Back in the 13th century, there was a monk who was sentenced to be walled up alive because he broke his sacred vows. Obviously, this guy wasn't a fan of dying, so what did he do? He promised the monastery that if they let him live, he would write a book that would contain all human knowledge in a day. Yikes, that might be worse than death. In order to fulfill his promise, he sold his soul to the devil himself. Supposedly, this Devil's Bible contained a complete Latin translation of the Bible and multiple other texts, such as medical formulas and even instructions for performing exorcisms. This book was created using more than 160 animal skins and apparently takes 2 people just to lift it. Although, mysteriously, this book became a bit lighter because 12 pages are actually missing. Rumor has it, these pages contain satanic rituals to summon the devil himself. Of course, there is no way in knowing unless we read it for ourselves, so if any of you hardcore readers out there get a chance to take a peek, let me know in the comments. Coming in at number 9 is the Nazca Lines. Most of us have heard of crop circles before, but what about the Nazca Lines? The Nazca Lines, just like crop circles, are actually named geoglyphs. Now, what is a geoglyph? A geoglyph is a large design produced on the ground and usually formed by clastic rocks, stones, stone fragments, and gravel or earth. The Nazca Lines were first discovered in the 1930s when pilots were flying over the Nazca Desert in southern Peru and came across these massive drawings. The ancient Nazca civilization made up these drawings consisting of animals, humans, and plants around 2,000 years ago. There are said to be over 100 of these drawings spanning a total of 50 square kilometers. And while many can identify who and what created these massive drawings, no one alive actually knows the reason behind them. Scholars theorize that these were massive signs to give incoming sailors directions, or that they were a way to communicate with those above us. Dun dun dun! Here at number 8 we have the Roman dodecahedrons. All over the world for hundreds of years, random stone and bronze objects have been popping up in fields and sometimes even in people's yards. These objects are called the Roman dodecahedrons. These objects have 12 sides with a small circle on each and pegs sticking out of every single corner. Experts have dated these objects all the way back to the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, but once again, they have no idea of their purpose. Many believe these objects resemble an ancient nautical devices, or were used to sow winter grains or even calibrate water pipes for Roman architects. In the end, all of these are just theories and cannot be told for sure. So maybe go and invest in a metal detector and see what you can find.
Number 7. The New London School Explosion. On the afternoon of March 18, 1937, the shop teacher at a school in New London, Texas turned on an electric sander. Unknown to him, there was a massive natural gas leak under the school. The sander sparked, which ignited the gas and caused a massive explosion that ended the lives of almost 300 students and teachers. It was absolutely horrific. Now, the force of the explosion was so great that a 2-ton block of concrete crushed a car parked 200 feet away. Now, this event is actually why natural gas has a smell now. To reduce the damage of future leaks, the Texas state legislature granted the Texas Railroad Commission regulatory authority to adopt and enforce regulations for the odorization of natural gas in order to prevent such accidents. Within weeks of the explosion, thiol, mercaptan, and odorous sulfur compound was added to natural gas. Now today, the strong odor makes leaks quickly detectable. Number 6. Chicken Poop Prison. Yep, you heard that name right. Chicken Poop Prison. What was this, you may ask? Well, it was a former prison in Lam Sing, Thailand. It was built by the French in 1893 when the French occupied the areas as part of the Franco-Siamese War to imprison Thai resistance fighters. The square-shaped tower is made from red bricks and is 4.4 meters wide and 7 meters tall, with 2 rows of slits along the sides. The tower was abandoned after the French withdrew in 1904, and the resistance prisoners were kept on the ground floor of the tower. Above them was a chicken coop. The floor between them was perforated, meaning chicken feces were able to fall down on the prisoners below as a form of torment. Now, the long-standing impacts of this much-feared torment are still felt in the region today, as there's a Thai saying for those who buck authority that roughly translates to, "Be careful not to get caught in a chicken poop prison." Yeah, that sounds horrible. Number 5. Town of St. Pierre. In the late 1890s and early 1900s, St. Pierre, Martinique was known as a beautiful town, but there was darkness looming over it, a volcano. Citizens of the area were so used to the volcanic activity that no one took it seriously when the fresh steaming vent holes and earth tremors started during April 1902. Then minor explosions began at the summit of the volcano, ash began to rain down continuously, and the nauseating stench of sulfur filled the air, but for some reason they stayed in the town. Even worse, more than 100 snakes slithered down and invaded the town. They ended the lives of 50 people, and people still stayed living there. There are reports of horses, pigs, and dogs screaming as red ants and foot-long centipedes crawled up their legs and bit them. Then on May 5th, a landslide of boiling mud and water from the Atang Sek crater leaked and spilled into the River Blanche, and 23 workmen died. This was followed by a tsunami that ended the lives of hundreds of people, and this naturally caused concern in the town, and many wanted to leave. So yeah, people just stayed there and went on with their lives while this was all happening. Even after the whole snake situation though, couldn't be me. Then 3 days later, on May 8th, Mount Keeley finally exploded, sending an avalanche of white-hot lava straight towards the town. Within 3 minutes, St. Pierre was completely obliterated, and of its 30,000 population, there were only 2 people who survived. Number 4. The Dancing Plague. The Dancing Plague was a case of dancing mania that occurred in modern-day France and the Holy Roman Empire from July 1518 to September 1518. Somewhere between 50 and 400 people took to dancing for weeks. The outbreak began in July 1518 when a woman by the name of Fru Tofia began to dance in a street in Strasbourg. She kept up this constant dancing for a week straight. Soon 36 others joined in on the dancing chaos, and in August of the same year, the dancing plague had claimed 400 victims. Dancers were beginning to collapse, and it said they died due to stroke or heart attack. No one knew what was causing this reaction, which meant no one understood how to remedy the situation either. By early September, the outbreak began to subside as the dancers were sent to a mountain shrine to pray for absolution. Now, there are many theories behind the phenomenon, the most popular being stress-induced mass hysteria, suggested by John Waller. Other theories include ergo and religious explanations. Number 3. The Halifax Explosion. Regarded by many as the biggest man-made explosion prior to the invention of the atomic bomb, a ship filled with explosives collided with another vessel in Halifax Harbor. The resulting explosion flattened much of the city's downtown core, ending the lives of roughly 2,000 and injuring 9,000. Now, the blast is said to have temporarily displaced water in the harbor, forming a tsunami that reached up to 15 meters high, surging over the wreckage of the waterfront. Now, the following day, Halifax was hit by a blizzard that dumped 40 centimeters of snow on top of the city, further complicating rescue efforts. Now, the city is also home to a cemetery where many victims of the Titanic were laid to rest, and it's said that the body identification system developed at the time of the Titanic sinking in 1912 aided efforts to identify victims of the Halifax explosion in 1917. Number 2. James Jameson Crime. You know Jameson whiskey? Well, on an expedition into Africa during the late 19th century, James Jameson, the heir to Jameson Irish Whiskey Empire, reportedly asked to witness humans eating other humans in action. In order to make his horrifying desire a reality, he purchased a slave girl and handed her over to men who ended her life and feasted on her flesh. Jameson is said to have sketched out the gruesome scene, later turning his rough illustrations into a series of watercolors. Of course, for years the family tried to bury the fact and the stories and discredit the witnesses. But his only rebuttal in the case, which reflected badly on him, was that he wanted to see if they would do it. Yeah, so think of that next time you have a drink. And coming at number 1 is the Viplum experiments. The National Dental Service of Sweden was established in 1938. The state of dental health was not well studied at the time, and cavities were widespread. It was suspected high sugar diets caused tooth decay, but there was no scientific proof. In 1945, the medical board commissioned a study on the subject, which would then become the Viplum experiments. The Viplum experiments were a series of human experiments where patients at Viplum Hospital for the Intellectually Disabled in Lund, Sweden, were fed large amounts of sweets, including extra sticky toffee, to provoke dental caries. The experiments were sponsored by both the sugar industry and the dentist community in an effort to determine whether carbohydrates affected the formation of cavities. The experiments provided extensive knowledge about dental health and resulted in enough data to link the intake of sugar to dental caries. However, today they are considered to have violated multiple principles of medical ethics, and yeah, that is just horrible.